You ever lie awake at 2 a.m. and count all the ways your wife's perfume outlasts your marriage? Welcome to my life. The scent lingering on Egyptian cotton sheets costs more than most people's rent, and she's been wearing it for someone else for months. I'm Thomas Mercer, and I fix cars for a living. Honest work with honest dirt under my fingernails. My wife Diane thinks that makes me beneath her now. Funny how perspective changes when your stepfather starts handing out jewelry like Halloween candy. The front door clicked open at 2:17 a.m. I know because I'd been staring at the ceiling, listening to the grandfather clock Richard bought her tick away the minutes of our joke of a marriage. Diane's heels tapped against the hardwood. Designer heels I didn't buy, walking across floors I did pay for. She thought I was asleep. I let her think it. The bathroom light flicked on, casting a yellow stripe under the door, water running, more of that expensive perfume being applied. At 2 a.m. after a girls' night that apparently required a wardrobe change and fresh makeup. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Text message. Not from me. Diane's phone, I muttered, reaching over to her side of the bed. She'd left it plugged in, screen facing up, careless. Or maybe she just didn't think the fool who pays the bills was smart enough to notice. The message was from someone named Liam. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Wear the blue dress. Blue dress. The one Richard bought her last week. The one that cost more than I make in a month at the shop. I set the phone back exactly where she'd left it and closed my eyes. Diane emerged from the bathroom smelling like a garden party, slipped into bed, and pretended to fall asleep within minutes. Academy Award performance right there, but I was just getting started with my own act. The next morning, I made coffee and scrambled eggs like nothing had happened. Diane came downstairs in a silk robe, another gift from dear old stepdad, and accepted breakfast with the grace of someone accepting tribute. How was your night out? I asked, buttering toast. Fine. Eloise was being dramatic about her divorce again. Diane didn't look up from her phone, checking messages, probably from Liam. Eloise, right. How's she holding up? You know how it is. Men can be such disappointments. I almost laughed. Yeah, we really can be. Diane finally looked at me, probably hearing something in my tone she couldn't quite place. You're in a strange mood this morning. Just thinking about work. Got a big repair job coming in today. She was already back to her phone. I'll be out this afternoon, meeting with Richard about some business things. Business things, of course. I sipped my coffee. He's been very generous lately. New car, new jewelry, that credit card. He wants to help us out. You should be grateful. Grateful. Right. Grateful that my wife's stepfather was funding her affair while I paid the mortgage, utilities, and everything else that kept our little charade running. I am grateful, Diane. More than you know. After she left for her business meeting, I sat in my kitchen and really looked around. Everything Richard had bought stood out like neon signs. The espresso machine, the crystal vase, the painting above the fireplace that cost more than my truck. Then I looked at everything I'd paid for. The house itself, the insurance, the taxes, the utilities that kept Richard's gifts functioning, the foundation that held up his decorative touches. Funny thing about foundations, remove them, and everything else comes tumbling down. I grabbed my laptop and started doing what I do best, figuring out how things work and where they break. Richard Mercer Sr. wasn't just Diane's stepfather. He was a real estate mogul with his fingers in a dozen different pies. Construction companies, development projects, investment partnerships. His name was on half the new buildings in our mid-sized New England city. But I'd been around long enough to know that flashy empires often rest on shaky ground. And I had something Richard didn't think I possessed: patience and attention to detail. I started with public records, property transfers, business registrations, permit applications, all available online if you know where to look. Then I moved to financial filings, partnership agreements, anything that painted a picture of how Richard's empire actually functioned. By lunch, I had a pretty clear picture. Richard's business model was essentially a shell game. Money moved between companies, projects were leveraged against each other, and everything depended on maintaining the confidence of his business partners. Confidence. Such a fragile thing. My phone rang. Benny from the shop. "Tom, you coming in today? Got 3 cars backed up and Mrs. Patterson's been calling about her transmission." "Be there in an hour, Benny. Just doing some research." "Research? You writing a book or something?" "Something like that." The shop was my sanctuary. Honest work, honest problems with honest solutions. When an engine doesn't start, you diagnose the issue and fix it. No games, no lies, no performance art. Benny had been working for me for 5 years. Good mechanic, better friend, and absolutely terrible at keeping secrets, which made him perfect for what I had in mind. "Benny, you know my wife Diane, right?" "Sure, boss. Nice lady. Drives that fancy Mercedes now." "Right, the Mercedes. You notice anything different about her lately?" Benny looked uncomfortable. "Different how?" "Come on, Benny. We've worked together long enough. You can tell me." He sighed and wiped his hands on a shop rag. "Look, Tom, it ain't my place to say nothing, but... She's been coming around asking about your schedule. When you work late, when you're here on weekends, and last week I saw her having lunch with some guy downtown. Looked pretty cozy." "What did this guy look like?" "Tall, slick hair, expensive suit, driving a BMW. Looked like the kind of guy who's never changed his own oil." "Liam. Had to be. Thanks for telling me, Benny. You okay, boss? You want me to, I don't know, keep an eye out or something?" "Actually, yeah. If you see anything else, let me know. And Benny, this stays between us for now." "You got it." I spent the rest of the day working on Mrs. Patterson's transmission and thinking about leverage. In mechanical terms, leverage lets you move heavy objects with minimal effort, apply force in the right place, and you can shift things that seem immovable. Richard's empire was heavy, but it wasn't immovable. It just required finding the right pressure points. That evening, Diane came home with shopping bags and a glow that had nothing to do with retail therapy. She was practically humming as she unpacked her purchases, more clothes, more jewelry, all charged to Richard's unlimited credit card. "Good day?" I asked. "Wonderful day. Richard introduced me to some of his business associates. Very interesting people." "I'll bet. What kind of business?" "Oh, you know, development projects, investment opportunities, things you wouldn't really understand." There it was, the casual dismissal. The assumption that the guy who keeps her lights on couldn't possibly grasp the complexities of her stepfather's empire. "You're probably right," I said. "I'm just a simple mechanic." Diane smiled and kissed my cheek. "Exactly. That's what I love about you, Thomas. You're so... uncomplicated." Uncomplicated. Right. After dinner, while Diane took one of her marathon baths, I returned to my research. Richard's business partnerships were extensive, but they all shared common characteristics. His partners were successful, conservative, and absolutely obsessed with their reputations. Men like that don't just invest money, they invest their credibility, and they're very, very careful about who they associate with. I started compiling a list: names, companies, contact information. Then I began cross-referencing Richard's various business entities, looking for patterns that might concern a careful investor. What I found was better than I'd hoped. Richard's companies were engaged in some creative accounting. Money flowed between entities in ways that maximized tax advantages but minimized transparency. Perfectly legal, probably, but the kind of thing that would make conservative business partners very nervous if they understood the full scope. There were also some regulatory issues: permit delays, environmental concerns, zoning disputes. Nothing major individually, but together they painted a picture of an operation that cut corners and pushed boundaries. Again, probably legal. But definitely the kind of thing that would concern investors who valued stability over quick profits. I spent 3 hours documenting everything, cross-referencing dates and amounts, building a comprehensive picture of how Richard's empire really functioned. Then I wrote a summary. Professional, factual, and absolutely devastating in its implications. The document was 15 pages of financial analysis, regulatory concerns, and business risks. Any competent investor who read it would immediately understand that Richard Mercer Sr. was exactly the kind of partner you avoid if you value your reputation. But I didn't send it anywhere. Not yet. Timing would be everything. Diane emerged from her bath wearing a new silk nightgown, another gift, no doubt, and found me reading in bed. "What's that?" she asked, nodding toward my laptop. "Just some articles about car repair techniques, trying to stay current." She laughed. "You're so dedicated to your little shop." Little shop. My little shop that paid for her little lifestyle before Richard started playing sugar daddy. "Someone has to pay the bills," I said. "That's what I love about you, Thomas. You're so responsible." She curled up next to me, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered Liam's text message and the blue dress and the casual way she'd dismissed my intelligence. "Diane, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy? I mean, really happy?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Why would you ask that?" "Just wondering. Sometimes I feel like I don't know, like we're living different lives." "We are living different lives, Thomas, that's the problem." There it was, the truth, finally. "What do you mean?" "I mean you're content to fix cars and come home and watch television. That's fine for you, but I want more." "More what?" "More everything. More excitement, more culture, more sophistication. Richard understands that. He's shown me what life could be like." "And what's that like?" "Bigger, better, more meaningful than worrying about transmission repairs and mortgage payments." I nodded slowly. "I see." "Do you? Because sometimes I think you don't understand me at all." "You might be surprised what I understand." She studied my face for a moment, then shrugged. "Maybe. But understanding and doing something about it are different things." "You're absolutely right about that." The next morning, I called in a personal day and drove to the public library. I needed to use their computers for what came next. My research couldn't be traced back to my home internet connection. I created an anonymous email account and began reaching out to Richard's business partners. Not all of them, just 3 key investors whose departure would trigger a cascade effect. The email was simple and professional. "I am writing to share some concerns about Richard Mercer Sr. and his business practices. As someone who values ethical partnerships, I thought you should be aware of the following information." Then I attached my 15-page analysis. I sent the email to 3 different investors, then deleted the account and cleared the browser history. Anonymous, untraceable, and absolutely devastating. Now came the hard part, waiting. I went to work and fixed cars and acted like nothing had changed. Diane continued her routine of business meetings and shopping trips. Richard kept showering her with gifts. Everything appeared normal on the surface. But I knew what was coming. I'd lit a fuse, and now it was just a matter of time before the explosion. 3 days later, Benny mentioned seeing Diane having lunch with her mystery man again. This time at an expensive restaurant downtown, the kind of place that required reservations and had wine lists thicker than phone books. "They looked real comfortable," Benny said, "like they'd done this before." "I'm sure they have." "You want me to, follow them or something?" "No need. I know where this is going." "You sure you're okay with all this, boss?" I looked up from the engine I was rebuilding. "Benny, sometimes you have to let people make their own choices, even when those choices are really, really stupid." "If you say so. But if it was my wife, what would you do?" "Probably something I'd regret." "Exactly. That's why I'm being patient." Patient and methodical. The anonymous emails had been delivered. Now I just had to wait for Richard's business partners to start asking questions. I didn't have to wait long. The first crack in Richard's empire appeared on a Tuesday morning. I was under the hood of a Chevy Suburban when Benny came running into the shop with his phone in his hand. "Boss, you gotta see this." He showed me a local news article. "Local real estate mogul under investigation." The headline made my coffee taste better than it had in months. According to the article, the Securities and Exchange Commission had received anonymous tips regarding irregularities in Richard Mercer Sr.'s business practices. They were launching a preliminary investigation into his various companies and partnerships. "Ain't that your wife's stepfather?" Benny asked. "Sure is." "Think this'll affect them?" "Oh, I'm counting on it." The beauty of regulatory investigations is that they create uncertainty, and uncertainty is poison to business partnerships built on confidence and reputation. I spent my lunch break at the Ledger, our local dive bar where information flowed more freely than the beer. The place was full of construction workers, contractors, and other blue-collar guys who worked on Richard's various projects. "You hear about Mercer?" asked Jimmy, a crane operator who'd worked several of Richard's developments. "What about him?" I played dumb. "Feds are sniffing around his books. Word is some of his partners are getting nervous." "Nervous how?" "Nervous like maybe they don't want their names associated with whatever the government's looking for." I nursed my beer and listened to the speculation. Apparently, Richard had called an emergency meeting with his major investors for later that week. Damage control, most likely, but the kind of meeting that often backfires when people start asking uncomfortable questions. That evening, Diane was unusually quiet during dinner. She picked at her food and kept checking her phone. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Richard's having some business troubles. Nothing serious, but it's stressful." "What kind of troubles?" "Just some regulatory nonsense. Bureaucrats looking for problems that don't exist." "I'm sure it'll work out." "Of course it will. Richard's very successful. He knows how to handle these things." But she didn't sound convinced. Later that night, I heard her on the phone in the bathroom. The conversation was muffled, but I caught enough to know she was talking to Liam. "Doesn't understand how serious this could be. Richard says it's just a fishing expedition. Maybe we should be more careful for a while." More careful. Interesting. Apparently, the stress was affecting their little affair. The next morning brought better news. Jimmy called me at the shop. "Tom, you're not going to believe this. Morrison Construction just pulled out of the Harbor Point project." Morrison Construction was one of Richard's biggest partners. If they were pulling out, it meant they'd received some information that made them very nervous. "That's a big project," I said. $20 million big, and word is, Morrison ain't the only one getting cold feet. I thanked Jimmy and hung up with a smile. The fuse was burning faster than I'd expected. That afternoon, Eloise showed up at the shop. Diane's best friend and primary gossip source, Eloise, was the kind of woman who collected secrets like some people collect stamps. "Thomas, I hope you don't mind me stopping by." "Not at all, Eloise. What brings you to my little shop?" She looked around with obvious distaste. "I wanted to talk to you about Diane." "What about her?" "She's been under a lot of stress lately, with Richard's business problems and everything." "I'm sure she has. The thing is, Thomas, Diane needs support right now. She needs to know her husband is there for her." I wiped my hands on a shop rag and gave Eloise my full attention. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe you could be more understanding, more supportive of the things that are important to her." "Like what?" "Like her relationship with Richard, like the opportunities he's provided, like the fact that she's trying to better herself, by having an affair with Richard's business associate while I paid the mortgage." "Eloise, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How long have you known about Liam?" Her face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. Tall guy, expensive suits, drives a BMW, takes my wife to lunch at fancy restaurants while I'm working." "Thomas, I think you're confused." "Am I? Because Benny's seen them together multiple times, and I've seen the text messages. Eloise looked like she wanted to run, but she was trapped between my truck and a stack of tires. Look, Thomas, marriages are complicated. Sometimes people need outlets. Outlets. Diane's a sophisticated woman with sophisticated needs. Maybe if you tried to understand that. Oh, I understand perfectly. I understand that my wife is having an affair with Liam while her stepfather pays for it. I understand that you've been helping her cover it up. And I understand that you all think I'm too stupid to notice. That's not... We don't think you're stupid. What do you think I am? Eloise straightened her shoulders, trying to recover some dignity. I think you're a good man who's in over his head. Diane needs more than you can provide. Like what? Like jewelry and cars and unlimited credit cards? Like excitement. Like culture. Like a man who can match her intellectually. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. What's so funny? Eloise demanded. You want to know what's funny? You think Liam and Richard are intellectually superior because they wear expensive suits and throw money around, but neither of them was smart enough to cover their tracks. What do you mean? I mean I know everything, Eloise. Every restaurant, every hotel, every gift. I know about the shell companies and the creative accounting and the regulatory shortcuts. I know exactly what kind of men Diane's chosen to associate with. Eloise was backing toward the door now. You're scaring me, Thomas. Good. You should be scared. Because everything you think you know about this situation is about to change. She practically ran to her car. That evening, Diane was agitated. She paced around the kitchen while I made dinner, checking her phone constantly. Richard's business meeting didn't go well, she finally said. Sorry to hear that. 2 more partners pulled out. They're saying they need to reassess their risk tolerance or something ridiculous like that. That does sound difficult. It's not fair. Richard's built an amazing company. These people are just panicking over nothing. Maybe they know something we don't. Diane stopped pacing and stared at me. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just that successful businessmen don't usually panic over nothing. Maybe there's more to this investigation than Richard's telling you. Richard tells me everything. Does he? Of course he does. We're family. Family. Right. The kind of family where the stepfather funds his stepdaughter's affair while her husband pays the bills. I'm sure you're right, I said. Richard seems like a very honest man. Something in my tone made her suspicious. You've been acting strange lately. Strange how? I don't know. Different. Like you know something. What would I know? I'm just a simple mechanic, remember? Don't be sarcastic. I'm not being sarcastic, I'm being honest. I fix cars for a living. What could I possibly know about high finance and business investigations? She studied my face for a long moment, then shook her head. You're right. I'm just stressed. Maybe you should talk to Liam about it. He might have some good advice. Diane froze. What did you say? I said maybe you should talk to Liam. Isn't he one of Richard's business associates? He might have some insights. How do you know about Liam? You mentioned him before. Said Richard introduced you to some business associates. She relaxed slightly. Right. Yes, Liam's been very helpful. Very supportive during this difficult time. I'll bet he has. The next morning brought the news I'd been waiting for. Benny arrived at work with a huge grin on his face. Boss, you're gonna love this! Harrison Development just announced they're pulling out of all their projects with Mercer. Harrison Development was Richard's biggest partner. Their departure would be like pulling the keystone out of an arch. That's a big deal, I said. $23 million big. And get this, they're demanding immediate repayment of all outstanding loans. I felt something that might have been satisfaction if I were the kind of man who took pleasure in other people's misfortune, which apparently I was. How'd you hear about this? My cousin works in their accounting department, says the whole office is buzzing about it. Apparently, they received some kind of report that scared the hell out of their board of directors. A report. 15 pages of carefully documented financial analysis and regulatory concerns. Amazing how effective the truth could be when presented to the right audience. My phone rang. Diane. Thomas, I need you to come home. Right now. What's wrong? Just come home, please. I found her in the living room, surrounded by papers, and looking like she'd been crying. Richard was there too, pacing by the window and talking loudly into his phone. Don't care what your board says, we had an agreement. This is exactly the kind of panic that destroys good companies. You'll regret this decision when the investigation clears everything up. He ended the call and threw his phone onto the couch. Problems? I asked. Nothing that can't be handled, Richard said, but he looked older than I'd ever seen him. Just some temporary setbacks. Richard's partners are being unreasonable, Diane said. They're pulling out of perfectly good projects because of some government fishing expedition. That's unfortunate. Richard studied me with new interest. You're taking this very calmly, Thomas. Should I be panicking? Most people would be concerned if their family's livelihood was threatened. Is our livelihood threatened? Of course not, Diane said quickly. Richard's just explaining the situation. But Richard was still watching me. You know, Thomas, I've always wondered what you really think about our arrangement. What arrangement? My helping Diane, the gifts, the credit card, the opportunities I've provided. I think you've been very generous. Generous? Yes, I have been, and I've always assumed you appreciated that generosity. I appreciate a lot of things, Richard. Such as? Such as learning how things really work, how money flows between companies, how partnerships are structured, how reputations are built and maintained. Something changed in Richard's expression. That's a very sophisticated perspective for a mechanic. You'd be surprised what you can learn if you pay attention. Diane looked back and forth between us, sensing undercurrents she didn't understand. What are you two talking about? She asked. Nothing, sweetheart, Richard said, but his eyes never left my face. Just business. Thomas doesn't understand business, Diane said. Maybe I've underestimated Thomas, Richard replied. We stared at each other for a long moment. Two men who finally understood exactly where they stood. Well, I said finally, I should get back to work. Bills don't pay themselves. No, Richard said slowly. They certainly don't. I was almost to the door when he spoke again. Thomas, if you ever want to discuss business, I'm available, man to man. I'll keep that in mind. But we both knew that conversation would never happen, because Richard was finally beginning to suspect what I'd known for months, that the fool who paid the bills was a lot smarter than anyone had imagined, and his empire was about to collapse. The third partner pulled out on Thursday morning. Westfield Investments, Richard's oldest and most conservative business associate, announced they were reassessing their portfolio and would be discontinuing all current partnerships pending resolution of ongoing regulatory concerns. In plain English, they were running for the hills. I was replacing brake pads on a Honda Civic when Benny brought me the news. He'd heard it from his girlfriend, who worked at the bank that handled Westfield's accounts. They're not just pulling out, Benny said. They're demanding immediate asset liquidation on 3 joint projects. What does that mean? Means Richard's got to come up with about $15 million in the next 30 days, or they start seizing collateral. I whistled low. That's a lot of money. Gets better. Apparently, the other partners are starting to make similar noises, like they're all comparing notes or something. They were comparing notes. My 15-page report was making the rounds, being forwarded from board member to board member, creating exactly the kind of panic I'd hoped for. How's Richard handling it? Word is he's calling in every favor he's got, but when this many people run for the exits at once, it becomes a stampede. Exactly. That afternoon, I decided to take a drive past Richard's office building. Nothing suspicious, just a man running errands who happened to be in the neighborhood. The parking lot told the story. Richard's usual fleet of expensive cars was there, along with several others I didn't recognize. Emergency meetings, most likely. Damage control sessions that were probably making everything worse. I was sitting in my truck, observing the chaos, when my phone rang. "Thomas?" Diane's voice was shaky. "Can you come home, please? What's wrong now? Just, please come home." I found her in the kitchen, staring at a pile of papers spread across the table. Credit card statements, bank notices, and what looked like legal documents. "What's all this?" Richard had to make some adjustments. I picked up one of the papers, a notice of account closure. The unlimited credit card was no longer unlimited, or functional. "He closed your credit card?" "Temporarily, just until this business situation gets resolved." "I see." I picked up another document, a loan recall notice. "What's this one?" "The car. The bank wants the car back." The Mercedes. Richard's most visible gift to his stepdaughter, and now it was being repossessed. "When?" "Tomorrow morning." I sat down across from her. "Diane, what exactly did Richard tell you?" "He said it's just temporary. A cash flow issue caused by his partners overreacting to the investigation. Once everything gets cleared up, he'll be able to restore everything." "And you believe that?" "Of course I believe it. Richard's a successful businessman. He's handled problems before." But her voice lacked conviction. For the first time since this whole thing started, Diane was beginning to understand that her stepfather might not be as powerful as she'd thought. "What about Liam?" I asked. She flinched. "What about him?" "Well, he works for Richard, right? He must have some insights into the situation." Liam's been very supportive." "I'm sure he has. But what does he think about the business problems?" Diane was quiet for a long moment. "He thinks maybe we should be more careful. Keep a lower profile until things settle down." More careful. Translation: the affair was becoming inconvenient now that Richard's money was drying up. "That sounds like good advice. Thomas, I need to ask you something." "Okay. If Richard's situation doesn't improve quickly, we might need to adjust our lifestyle for a while." "Adjust how?" "Maybe cancel some subscriptions, eat out less, that kind of thing." I almost laughed. Diane was talking about minor lifestyle adjustments while staring at repossession notices and canceled credit cards. She still didn't understand how far Richard had fallen. "We'll figure it out," I said. "You're not angry?" "Why would I be angry?" Because you might have to carry more of the financial burden for a while." Carry more of the financial burden. I'd been carrying the entire financial burden for years, but this was the first time she'd acknowledged it. "Diane, I've always carried the financial burden. The mortgage, the utilities, the insurance, the groceries, that's all been me. Richard's gifts were just decorations." She looked genuinely surprised. "But the credit card paid for jewelry and clothes and restaurants. I paid for everything that actually mattered." "I didn't realize—" "Of course you didn't. You thought I was just the fool who paid the bills." Something shifted in her expression. "Thomas, you sound different." "Different how?" "Harder, like you're angry about something." "Maybe I am angry." "About what?" I gestured at the papers scattered across the table. "About all of this. About the way you've treated me. About the way Richard's treated me. About the way you both assumed I was too stupid to notice what was really going on." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I know about Liam, Diane. I've known for months." The color drained from her face. "Thomas, I can explain." "Can you? Can you explain why you're having an affair while I pay for the house you're cheating in?" Can you explain why you let your stepfather fund your betrayal while dismissing me as some kind of simpleton? It's not what you think. What is it then? It's complicated. No, it's not complicated. It's simple. You wanted more than I could give you, so you found someone who could give it to you, and you let Richard pay for it while I paid for everything else. Diane was crying now, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no desire to comfort her. Thomas, please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain. I understand perfectly. Then why aren't you yelling? Why aren't you throwing me out? Because I'm not done yet. Done with what? Done watching Richard's empire collapse? Done watching you realize that your sophisticated friends aren't so sophisticated after all? Done watching Liam decide that a woman with canceled credit cards isn't worth the risk? She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. You know something, she said slowly. About Richard's business problems. You know something. I know lots of things. What did you do? I did what any reasonable person would do when they discovered their wife was having an affair funded by dirty money. I made sure the right people knew what kind of man they were dealing with. You're the one who contacted his partners? I provided information. What they did with that information was their choice. Diane's tears stopped. You destroyed Richard's business. I exposed Richard's business. There's a difference. He trusted you. We trusted you. You trusted me to be stupid. You trusted me to pay the bills and keep my mouth shut while you spent his money on your affair. You trusted me to be the fool. Thomas, you don't understand what you've done. I understand exactly what I've done. I've shown Richard's partners that their reputations were at risk. I've shown them that Richard's business practices weren't as clean as they appeared. I've shown them that continuing to associate with him would be a mistake. But why? Why would you do this to us? Because you did it to me first. The next morning, the Mercedes was gone, towed away by the bank while Diane watched from the kitchen window. She stood there for a long time after the truck disappeared, probably trying to process how quickly her world was changing. I made coffee and read the newspaper like it was any other day. The business section had a small article about Richard's troubles. Local developer faces partner exodus. The reporter had done his homework. The article mentioned the SEC investigation, the canceled projects, and the cascade of partner withdrawals that was threatening Richard's empire. Cascade. Perfect word for what was happening. Thomas? Diane's voice was small. What am I supposed to drive? There's a bus stop 3 blocks away. I can't take the bus. Why not? Because people will see me. What people? My friends, people who know me. Your friends like Eloise? The ones who helped you cover up your affair? She flinched. That's not fair. What's not fair is spending 3 years thinking your husband was too stupid to notice that you were cheating on him. My phone rang. Benny. Boss, you need to get down here. We got a situation. What kind of situation? The kind where your wife's boyfriend is standing in our parking lot looking like he wants to start trouble. I looked at Diane. Expecting company? I called Liam last night, after we talked. I needed someone to talk to. And you told him what, exactly? I told him that you knew about us, and that you might have had something to do with Richard's problems. Perfect. Now I'd get to meet the man who'd been enjoying Richard's hospitality while I paid the mortgage. I have to go to work, I said. Thomas, please, don't do anything stupid. Stupid? Like having an affair? Like letting my stepfather fund it? Like assuming my husband was too dumb to notice? That's not what I meant. I know exactly what you meant. You meant don't embarrass you any more than I already have. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Thomas, wait. What? What happens now? Now? Now you get to find out what life looks like without Richard's money, and I get to watch. Liam was waiting for me in the shop parking lot, just like Benny had said. Tall, well-dressed, expensive car, exactly what I'd expected. He looked like the kind of man who'd never changed his own oil or paid his own bills. "You must be Thomas," he said as I got out of my truck. "And you must be Liam. Nice to finally meet the man who's been screwing my wife." He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About this situation with Richard. About what you've done." "What have I done?" "Don't play dumb. We know you contacted Richard's partners. We know you provided information that caused them to pull out." "Did I? That's interesting. What kind of information?" "Financial records, business practices, regulatory concerns. Sounds like important stuff for business partners to know about." Liam stepped closer, trying to intimidate me. "You don't understand what you've done. Richard's empire employs hundreds of people. Your little revenge fantasy is going to cost a lot of innocent people their jobs." "My revenge fantasy? Is that what we're calling it when someone exposes fraud and corruption?" "It's not fraud, it's aggressive business practices." "Right. And your relationship with my wife is aggressive friendship practices." Benny emerged from the shop, wiping his hands on a rag. "Everything okay out here, boss?" "Fine, Benny. Just meeting one of Diane's friends." Liam looked back and forth between us, clearly not comfortable with the audience. "This isn't over," he said finally. "You're right," I replied. "It's not over. It's just getting started." He drove away in his BMW, probably heading back to Richard's office to report on our conversation. Let him. I was curious to see what their next move would be. "Who was that guy?" Benny asked. "Someone who's about to learn that actions have consequences." "You want me to keep an eye out, in case he comes back?" "No need. He's got bigger problems to worry about now." That afternoon, Jimmy stopped by with more news from the construction sites. "Mercer's in full panic mode," he said, calling emergency meetings, trying to restructure loans, begging partners to reconsider. "Any luck?" "Are you kidding? When this many people run for the exits at once, it becomes a feeding frenzy. Everyone wants their money back before the well runs dry." "How much time does he have?" "Word is, maybe 2 weeks before he has to start liquidating assets. After that," Jimmy shrugged. "Game over." 2 weeks. Faster than I'd expected, but not surprising. Richard's empire had been built on confidence and leverage. Remove the confidence, and the leverage becomes a noose. That evening, I came home to find Diane on the phone in the kitchen. She was crying again. "I understand, but surely there's something—" "No, I know you can't." "Yes, I'll figure something out." She hung up and looked at me with red eyes. "That was the spa. They're canceling my membership. Apparently, my credit card was declined." "That's unfortunate." "Thomas, this is serious. All of my accounts are being closed. The gym, the country club, even my hair salon. Welcome to the real world. This isn't funny." "You're right. It's not funny. It's justice." "Justice? You're destroying innocent people because you're angry at me." "I'm not destroying anyone. I'm just making sure the truth comes out." "The truth? What truth?" "The truth about Richard's business practices. The truth about where his money really comes from. The truth about what kind of man your stepfather really is. He's a good man who's worked hard for everything he has. He's a con artist who's been playing shell games with other people's money. And now those people know it." Diane stared at me for a long moment. "I don't even recognize you anymore." "That's because you never really knew me in the first place. I married you. You married the fool who paid the bills. You never bothered to find out who I really was. And who are you really? I'm the man who's going to watch your world collapse. And I'm going to enjoy every minute of it." She left the room without another word. I heard her on the phone again later, probably calling Liam or Richard or one of her fair-weather friends. But it wouldn't matter. The cascade had started, and nothing could stop it now. Richard's empire was going to fall, and everyone who'd dismissed me as just the fool who paid the bills was going to learn exactly how wrong they'd been. The foreclosure notice arrived on a Monday morning. I found it slipped under our front door when I left for work. Official legal documents informing us that Richard's mansion was being seized by the bank to satisfy outstanding debts. I left it on the kitchen table for Diane to find. By the time I got to the shop, word was already spreading through town. Benny met me at the door with a huge grin. "Boss, you hear about Mercer's house?" "What about it?" "Bank took it, locked the gates this morning and posted security guards. Apparently he owes them something like $8 million. $8 million. Richard's showpiece mansion, the symbol of his success, was now just another asset being liquidated to pay his debts. "Where's Richard staying?" I asked. "Nobody knows. Some say he's at a hotel downtown. Others think he left town entirely." Interesting. The man who'd been so generous with jewelry and credit cards was now homeless and possibly on the run. My phone rang. "Diane. Thomas, I need you to come home, right now." "What's wrong?" "Just come home, please." I found her sitting at the kitchen table staring at the foreclosure notice. She looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. "Did you know about this?" she asked. "Know about what?" "Richard's house, the foreclosure. I heard something about it at the shop. He's lost everything. The house, the cars, the business, everything. That's what happens when you build an empire on other people's money." She looked up at me with something approaching hatred. "You're enjoying this." "Maybe I am." "He's family, Thomas. Whatever you think about his business practices, he's still family. He's the man who funded your affair while I paid for the house you were cheating in. Forgive me if I don't feel much sympathy. This isn't just about Richard. This affects me too." "Yes, it does." "What am I supposed to do now? I have no car, no credit cards, no money of my own." "You could get a job." She looked at me like I'd suggested she start robbing banks. "A job?" "You know, work for money like most people do." "I haven't worked in years. What kind of job could I possibly get?" "I don't know. Retail? Food service? There are lots of opportunities for people willing to work." "You want me to work in retail?" "I want you to understand what it's like to earn your own money instead of spending someone else's. This is revenge. This is reality." My phone buzzed. Text message from a number I didn't recognize. "We need to talk. Meet me at the Ledger tonight, 8 p.m. R. Richard. Apparently, he was still in town and wanted a face-to-face conversation. "Who was that?" Diane asked. "Work stuff." "Thomas, I need to ask you something." "What?" "If I apologize, if I end things with Liam and try to make our marriage work, would you consider calling off your war against Richard?" I stared at her for a long moment. "You think this is about our marriage? Isn't it?" "No, Diane. This isn't about our marriage. This is about justice. This is about consequences. This is about making sure that people who think they're above the rules learn that they're not. But if I make things right between us, there's nothing to make right. Our marriage ended the moment you decided I wasn't good enough for you. Everything that's happened since then has just been the cleanup." She started crying again, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no desire to comfort her. "I'll be out tonight," I said. "Business meeting." The Ledger was nearly empty when I arrived at 8. Just a few regulars nursing beers and watching a baseball game on the ancient television above the bar. Richard was sitting in a corner booth, looking like a man who'd lost everything, which, technically, he had. "Thomas, thank you for coming." "Richard." I slid into the booth across from him. Up close, he looked even worse. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit was wrinkled, and his eyes had the hollow look of a man who'd been awake for days. "You know why I wanted to meet," he said. "I can guess. You destroyed me. I exposed you. Same thing." "Not really. If your business practices had been legitimate, my information wouldn't have mattered." Richard laughed bitterly. Legitimate. You have no idea how business really works. I know how it's supposed to work, with honest partnerships and transparent accounting and regulatory compliance. That's naive. That's legal. Legal and profitable aren't always the same thing. No, they're not, which is why your partners ran when they found out what you were really doing. Richard leaned forward. Do you have any idea how many people you've hurt? How many jobs you've destroyed? How many families will suffer because of your little revenge scheme? Do you have any idea how many people you've hurt over the years? How many investors you've misled? How many corners you've cut? That's different. How? Because I was building something, creating jobs, developing properties, contributing to the community. You were running a con game, moving money between shell companies and hoping nobody would notice. It wasn't a con game. It was sophisticated financial engineering. Same thing. We sat in silence for a moment, two men who finally understood each other completely. What do you want from me? Richard asked finally. Nothing. I already have what I wanted. Which is? Justice, consequences, the satisfaction of watching you learn that actions have prices. And Diane? What about her? What about her? She's innocent in all this. I laughed out loud. Innocent? She's been having an affair with your business associate while I paid her bills. How is that innocent? She's young. She made mistakes. She's not young, Richard. She's a grown woman who made choices, bad choices. So you're going to punish her forever? I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just not enabling anyone anymore. Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and grimaced. More bad news? I asked. My lawyer, apparently the SEC wants to schedule another interview. That sounds serious. It is serious. They're talking about criminal charges now. Criminal charges for what? Securities fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy. Sounds like you need a good lawyer. I had a good lawyer. I can't afford him anymore. Richard finished his drink and stood up. This isn't over, Thomas. Yes, it is. You just haven't accepted it yet. I'll rebuild. I've done it before. With what? You have no money, no credit, no partners, and possibly a criminal record in your future? I have connections. You had connections. Past tense. Nobody wants to associate with a man under federal investigation. Richard stared at me for a long moment, probably trying to reconcile the man sitting across from him with the fool who'd paid the bills for so many years. I underestimated you, he said finally. Everyone did. That was our mistake. Yes, it was. After he left, I sat alone in the booth and ordered another beer. The bartender was Jimmy's cousin, a guy named Pete who'd worked construction for Richard until the project started getting canceled. That was Richard Mercer you were talking to, Pete said. Yeah. Man, that guy really screwed a lot of people. My whole crew got laid off when the Harbor Point project got canceled. Sorry to hear that. Not your fault. Word is, Mercer was running some kind of scam, moving money around, cooking books, that kind of thing. Where'd you hear that? Everywhere. Guys who worked for him, suppliers who got stiffed, contractors who never got paid. Turns out, he owed money to everybody. That's unfortunate. Unfortunate? Hell, it's justice. Guy like that, thinking he's better than everyone else, treating working people like dirt. About time he got what was coming to him. I finished my beer and drove home through the quiet streets of our small city. Richard's empire was gone, his mansion was foreclosed, and his stepdaughter was learning what life looked like without unlimited credit cards. But I wasn't done yet. When I got home, I found Diane packing a suitcase. Going somewhere? I asked. Liam's apartment. He said I could stay there until I figure things out. How generous of him. Thomas, I want you to know that I'm sorry. For everything. Okay. Is that all you're going to say? What do you want me to say? I don't know. Something. Anything. I hope you and Liam are very happy together. This isn't about Liam. Sure it is. Richard's money is gone, so now you're moving on to the next man who might be able to provide what I couldn't. That's not fair. What's not fair is 3 years of marriage to someone who thought I was too stupid to notice she was cheating. Diane finished packing and stood by the door with her suitcase. What happens to the house? She asked. I keep paying the mortgage. You know, like I always have. And us? There is no us. There hasn't been for a long time. Thomas, I know I made mistakes, but maybe we could… Could what? Pretend this never happened. Go back to the way things were? Maybe. The way things were was you spending Richard's money on your affair while I paid for everything else. Why would I want to go back to that? She didn't have an answer. Goodbye, Diane. Thomas. Goodbye. She left without another word. I heard her car, Liam's car actually, pull out of the driveway and disappear into the night. I walked through the house, noting all the things that would be leaving with her. The expensive artwork, the designer furniture, the crystal vases, all of Richard's gifts, now just reminders of a con game that had finally been exposed. But the house itself would remain. The foundation I'd paid for, the utilities I'd maintained, the mortgage I'd never missed a payment on, the things that actually mattered. I poured myself a whiskey and sat in my kitchen, listening to the silence. For the first time in years, I felt something approaching peace. My phone buzzed. Text message from Benny. Boss, you see the news? Mercer got arrested. I turned on the television and found the local news station. There was Richard, being led away in handcuffs, while reporters shouted questions. The charges were exactly what he'd mentioned at the bar: securities fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy. The reporter was explaining how an anonymous tip had led to the investigation that ultimately brought down Richard's empire. Anonymous tip. 15 pages of carefully documented financial analysis that had started a cascade of events leading to this moment. I turned off the television and finished my whiskey. Tomorrow, I'd go back to work fixing cars and living an honest life. Tonight, I'd enjoy the satisfaction of watching justice finally catch up with people who thought they were above the law. The fool who paid the bills had turned out to be smarter than anyone imagined, and everyone who'd underestimated me was about to learn exactly how expensive that mistake had been. 3 weeks after Richard's arrest, I was under the hood of a Ford F-150 when Eloise showed up at the shop. She looked terrible, hollow-eyed and nervous, like someone who hadn't been sleeping well. Thomas, we need to talk. About what? About what you did to Richard. About what's happening to all of us. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and gave her my full attention. What's happening to all of you? The investigation isn't stopping with Richard. The FBI is interviewing everyone who was connected to his business, everyone who received gifts or favors or benefits. That sounds thorough. They asked me about the money. What money? The money Richard gave me for helping Diane, for keeping secrets, arranging meetings, providing alibis. Interesting. I'd suspected Eloise was getting paid for her services, but I hadn't known for sure. How much money? $5,000 over the past year. He said it was for being a good friend to Diane. And now the FBI knows about it. They know about everything: bank records, credit card statements, cash payments. They're treating it like a conspiracy. Maybe because it was a conspiracy. Eloise stepped closer, lowering her voice. Thomas, they're asking about you, too. What about me? About whether you knew. About whether you were involved. About whether you benefited from Richard's business. I almost laughed. Did you tell them I was driving a 10-year-old truck and living in the same house I bought before I met Diane? I told them you seemed oblivious to everything. Good, because I was oblivious. I was just the fool who paid the bills, remember? But you weren't oblivious. You knew about the affair. You knew about Richard's business practices. You knew everything. I figured it out eventually, but that doesn't make me part of the conspiracy. Eloise was quiet for a moment. Thomas, I'm scared. Of what? Of going to prison. Of losing everything. of having my life destroyed because I helped my friend have an affair. You didn't just help your friend have an affair. You helped cover up financial crimes. You took money to keep secrets about illegal business practices. I didn't know they were illegal. You didn't want to know. There's a difference. What am I supposed to do? Tell the truth. Cooperate with the investigation. Hope they're more interested in Richard than in his accomplices. Is that what you're doing? I don't need to do anything. I never took Richard's money. I never participated in his schemes, and I never benefited from his crimes. But you destroyed him. I exposed him. The destruction was self-inflicted. Eloise left without another word, probably heading to her lawyer's office to figure out how much trouble she was really in. That afternoon, Benny brought me more news from the rumor mill. Diane's boyfriend got arrested, he said. Liam? Yeah. Apparently, he was more involved in Mercer's business than anyone realized. Money laundering, fraudulent contracts, something about kickbacks from construction companies. So Liam hadn't just been Richard's employee, he'd been a full partner in the criminal enterprise. No wonder he'd been so concerned about the investigation. Where's Diane now? Nobody knows. Word is Liam's apartment got raided by the FBI. She wasn't there when it happened, but all her stuff was. Diane was homeless again. No Richard, no Liam, no credit cards, no car. Just the consequences of her choices catching up with her. You feel bad for her? Benny asked. Should I? She's your wife. She was my wife. Past tense. Still, she's got to be scared. She should be scared. She spent 3 years lying to me while taking money from criminals. Fear is appropriate. That evening, I was making dinner when someone knocked on my front door. I opened it to find 2 FBI agents holding badges and serious expressions. Mr. Mercer? I'm Agent Collins. This is Agent Martinez. We'd like to ask you some questions about Richard Mercer Sr. Of course. Come in. They sat in my living room and pulled out notebooks while I made coffee. Professional, polite, but clearly focused on their investigation. Mr. Mercer, how long have you known Richard Mercer Sr.? About 4 years, since I married his stepdaughter. What was your relationship with him? He was my wife's stepfather. We saw each other at family gatherings, holidays, that sort of thing. Did you have any business relationships with him? No. I own an auto repair shop. Richard was in real estate development. Our businesses never overlapped. Did you ever receive any gifts or payments from Richard Mercer Sr.? No. He gave gifts to my wife, but never to me directly. Were you aware of his business practices? I paused, considering my answer carefully. I knew he was successful and generous with his money. Beyond that, I didn't pay much attention to his business affairs. When did you first become suspicious that something might be wrong? When his business partners started pulling out of projects and the SEC launched an investigation. Before that, I assumed he was just a successful businessman. Agent Collins made notes while Agent Martinez studied my face. Mr. Mercer, we've spoken with several people who suggest you might have had more knowledge of Richard's activities than you're indicating. Such as? Such as your wife's friend, Eloise Patterson. She suggests you were aware of financial irregularities in Richard's business operations. Eloise is trying to minimize her own involvement in Richard's crimes. I wouldn't put much weight on her accusations. What do you mean by her involvement? I mean she was being paid to help cover up my wife's affair with one of Richard's business associates. If she's pointing fingers at me, it's probably to distract attention from her own problems. The agents exchanged glances. You knew about your wife's affair? Agent Martinez asked. I figured it out eventually. How did you react to that discovery? I was disappointed but not surprised. Our marriage had been deteriorating for some time. Did you take any action in response? Another careful pause. I consulted a divorce lawyer about my options. Did you contact any of Richard's business partners? No. Did you provide information about Richard's business practices to anyone? I answered questions when asked, but I didn't initiate any conversations about Richard's business. It was technically true. I'd provided information anonymously, and the agents hadn't asked specifically about anonymous communications. Mr. Mercer, we need to ask you about your whereabouts on several specific dates. They ran through a timeline of events: when Richard's partners started withdrawing, when the SEC investigation began, when various business deals collapsed. I provided honest answers about where I'd been and what I'd been doing, none of which contradicted my story about being an uninformed bystander. After an hour of questions, the agents seemed satisfied. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Mercer. We may have follow-up questions as the investigation continues. Of course, I want to see justice done as much as anyone. After they left, I sat in my kitchen and thought about the conversation. I'd told the truth, carefully phrased and selectively presented, but still the truth. I hadn't lied about anything. I'd just been strategic about what information to volunteer. The investigation would continue, Richard would probably go to prison, and everyone who'd participated in his schemes would face consequences. But I would emerge clean, because I'd never actually participated in anything illegal. I'd just been very, very good at paying attention. The next morning brought a phone call from my lawyer. Thomas, I've been contacted by the FBI. They want to verify some information about your marriage and your relationship with Richard Mercer. What kind of information? Timeline stuff. When you got married, when you first met Richard, when you became aware of problems in your marriage. Routine verification, but you should be prepared for more questions. Am I in any legal trouble? Not based on what they've told me. You appear to be a witness rather than a suspect. But keep our conversations confidential and call me before you answer any more questions. Will do. That afternoon, Diane called. First time I'd heard from her since she'd moved out. Thomas, I need help. What kind of help? I need a place to stay. Liam's been arrested, his apartment was seized, and I have nowhere to go. What about friends? Family? Everyone's avoiding me. They're all scared of being associated with Richard's investigation. That's unfortunate. Thomas, please. I know I made mistakes, but I'm desperate. You made choices, Diane. Choices have consequences. I'll do anything. I'll sign divorce papers. I'll testify against Richard. I'll make a public apology. Whatever you want. I don't want anything from you. Then why won't you help me? Because helping you would be enabling you. And I'm done enabling people who think actions don't have consequences. So you're just going to let me be homeless? You're not homeless because of me. You're homeless because you chose to have an affair with a criminal while living off money from illegal business activities. I didn't know the money was illegal. You didn't want to know. You wanted the jewelry and the cars and the credit cards, and you didn't care where they came from. Thomas, please. This call is no longer in service. I hung up and blocked her number. 2 days later, I read in the newspaper that Diane had been arrested on charges of conspiracy and money laundering. Apparently, the FBI had evidence that she'd known about Richard's illegal activities and had helped conceal them from investigators. The article mentioned that she was being held without bail, pending trial. I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no satisfaction. Just the quiet peace of watching justice finally catch up with people who'd thought they were above the law. That evening, I sat in my kitchen with a whiskey and thought about the past few months. Richard's empire had collapsed, his accomplices were facing criminal charges, and everyone who'd dismissed me as just the fool who paid the bills had learned exactly how wrong they'd been. But I wasn't celebrating. I was just grateful that the truth had finally come out. My phone rang. Unknown number. Thomas Mercer? Yes. This is Detective Morrison with the city police. I'm calling to inform you that your wife has listed you as her emergency contact. Ex-wife, and I'm not interested in being anyone's emergency contact. Sir, she's asked us to call you about bail. She can ask. I'm not paying it. She says you're the only person she has left. That's not my problem. Sir, she's your wife. She was my wife, past tense. She made her choices, and now she gets to live with the consequences. I hung up and poured another whiskey. The next morning, I drove to work through streets that looked exactly the same as they had 6 months ago. Same buildings, same traffic, same people going about their daily lives, but everything felt different now. Richard's office building was empty, with for lease signs in every window. His construction projects sat abandoned, half-finished monuments to his failed empire. His mansion remained foreclosed and vacant, slowly deteriorating behind locked gates. The cascade I'd started had swept away everything he'd built, leaving nothing but ruins and criminal charges. At the shop, Benny was waiting with coffee and a newspaper. You see this? He showed me the headline. Local real estate mogul sentenced to 15 years. Richard had pled guilty to avoid a longer sentence. 15 years in federal prison for securities fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy. At his age, it was essentially a life sentence. What about the others? I asked. Liam got 8 years. That Eloise woman got probation and community service. Your ex-wife is still waiting for trial, but word is she's looking at 5 to 10 years. 5 to 10 years. Diane would be in her 40s when she got out, with a criminal record and no money and no friends. The sophisticated life she'd wanted so badly was gone forever. You feel bad about any of it? Benny asked. Should I? They're all going to prison because of what you did. They're all going to prison because of what they did. I just made sure the right people knew about it. Still, that's a lot of lives destroyed. Those lives were built on lies and stolen money. They destroyed themselves. Benny nodded slowly. I guess you're right. Just seems like a lot of collateral damage. Collateral damage. Interesting phrase for what had happened to people who'd chosen to participate in criminal activities. Benny, let me ask you something. If you found out your wife was cheating on you with money from illegal business deals, what would you do? Probably something stupid. Exactly. Something emotional, something reckless, something that would get me in trouble. Instead, I did something smart. I gathered evidence, I presented facts, and I let the legal system handle the rest. When you put it that way, that's the only way to put it. I didn't destroy anyone. I just stopped enabling criminals. That afternoon, I got a call from my divorce lawyer. Thomas, I have good news. Diane's agreed to an uncontested divorce. No alimony, no property claims, no complications. She just wants it finalized before her trial. Fine with me. There's one thing. She's asked if she can keep her wedding ring. I thought about that for a moment. The wedding ring I'd bought with honest money, back when I'd thought our marriage was real. No, she can keep the jewelry Richard bought her, but not the ring I bought her. I'll let her lawyer know. 2 weeks later, the divorce was final. I was officially free from a marriage that had been a lie for years. That evening, I drove to the Ledger for a drink. The bar was busy, full of working people unwinding after honest days of honest work. People who paid their own bills, earned their own money, and didn't need to steal or cheat or lie to get what they wanted. Pete the bartender brought me a beer without being asked. Heard your divorce went through, he said. Good news travels fast. You doing okay? Better than okay. Good for you. That whole situation with Mercer and your ex-wife. Man, what a mess. It was definitely a mess. But you came through it clean. That's impressive. I just told the truth. Yeah, but you told it to the right people at the right time. That takes guts. I sipped my beer and looked around the bar. These were my people. Mechanics and construction workers and small business owners who understood the value of honest work and honest money. Pete, let me ask you something. You think I did the right thing? Exposing criminals? Hell yes, you did the right thing. Even though people got hurt? People who chose to break the law got hurt. That's different. How? Because consequences aren't punishment when you earn them. Consequences aren't punishment when you earn them. perfect summary of everything that had happened. I finished my beer and drove home through the quiet streets of my small city. The house was exactly as I'd left it, clean, organized, and paid for with honest money. I poured a whiskey and sat in my kitchen, listening to the silence. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. Richard was in prison. Liam was in prison. Diane was awaiting trial. Eloise was facing probation and community service. Everyone who'd participated in the conspiracy was facing consequences. And I was free. Free from a fraudulent marriage, free from criminal associates, free from the burden of enabling people who thought they were above the law. My phone sat silent on the counter. No calls from Diane begging for help. No visits from Eloise seeking forgiveness. No demands from Richard for explanations. Just silence. Beautiful, peaceful silence. I raised my glass in a private toast. To consequences, I said to the empty room, and to the fools who thought they could avoid them. The fool who paid the bills had turned out to be the smartest man in the room, and everyone who'd underestimated me had learned exactly how expensive that mistake could be. This call was no longer in service.